Let me explain. Every die-hard football fan has developed an obsession with Brighton's recruitment process because, in one way or another, they seem to be able to attract elite players out of thin air as if they possess a crystal ball. They also have the best scouting team in the Premier League and almost never make mistakes, which is precisely what adds so much intrigue to this tale. The one bad player they let go may have been the best to ever play for their team. This is Victor Giocares, in case you haven't heard of him. He is an incredible football player. In the last 15 years, the Portuguese league has brought you Di Maria, Nanico, Entra, Reims, Falca, Hulk, Bernardo, Black, Ederson, Felix, Bruno, Milita, Nunes. It's a seemingly infinite pool of ridiculous talent, and still I can't stop myself from seeing Giocares as maybe the most exciting of all. The greatest goal contributions in the world with 50 games, 43 goals, and 14 assists. After arriving in Portugal, this guy won 5 consecutive Player of the Month awards. He is already being referred to in Sweden as the next Zlatan Ibrahimovic, and Portuguese media are raving about how much the player reminds them of Ronaldo. Personally, I find him to be a lot like Lucas Podolski before his injury, which is concerning given that Giocares never seems to get hurt. In all honesty, he may be the most intimidating player I've ever seen in this league. He is not only physically strong and able to tackle any center back, but despite his bulk, he still has incredible foot speed. The outcome is a player who can create more chances than the league's best playmakers, who can score more goals than the best target man and take on 1v1, often even 1v2 situations, as well as the best wingers available. As one newspaper put it, he's a transition demon, a Frankenstein footballer and Ivan Drago look-alike who seems like he came straight out of a lab. And still, we gotta ask the question, how exactly did this guy get to 26 years of age, playing right under the noses of all the Premier League greats and still leave without anyone noticing? Even now, how is no one triggered? Look, to show you just how much Brighton messed up, we gotta go back to the 17th of September 2020. Brighton were playing 3rd Division Portsmouth for the second round of the Carabao Cup. For all intents and purposes, this was kind of a meaningless match, but in a way that's what made it so special in retrospect, because with the stakes being so low, Graham Potter fielded a lot of players who otherwise would not get much of a chance to play, and among those names two stood out, Victor Giocares and Alexis McAllister. At the time, they were both 23 years old and both played less than 10 matches for the club, and that they each scored their first goal for Brighton. In fact, Giocares even got an assist as well. But while McAllister's goal allowed them to get called back for the next League Cup match, and then to slowly get introduced into the starting 11, taking over the team and being sold to Liverpool for a fortune just 3 years later, Giocares experienced the exact opposite. 2 weeks later, he had already been loaned out, and without ever stepping foot in a Premier League match, he would never again play for Brighton. But why were the two players treated so differently? Well, if you really look at each of their famous signings, they didn't really appear out of thin air. McAllister was already doing well at Boca Juniors when a note came from Rosario Central. Trossard was amazing at Genk. Mitoma was even en route to play Champions League football with Sancho Luis. In fact, a lot of their best players like Gilmour, Lamptey, and Welbeck came straight from top clubs like Arsenal, United, and Chelsea. But Giocares, well, as one of his coaches at Brighton would admit, we found it hard to believe the club had dug up such a talent straight from the Swedish second tier without facing any competition. And to a certain extent, you really can't blame them. Giocares really had come out of nowhere. Back before the fandom, his only ever transfer, if you can even call it that, came when he was scouted at 15 years of age by IF Brommapojkarna. If you never heard of them, well, that isn't exactly surprising. They were one of the worst teams in the Swedish league. In fact, even though it took less than 2 years for Giocares to get promoted to their first team, by then they had already gotten relegated after one of the worst league campaigns you'll ever see. Just 12 points from 30 matches, even the second worst team had more than twice their points. You could argue that, at the time, they weren't even good enough for the second tier, and you know what, you'd be right. The next year, even with Giocares getting his first few minutes for the team, they finished last place once more, winning only 5 matches all year. Suddenly, Giocares was approaching his 19th birthday, and when he should have been following the footsteps of Zlatan, maybe getting a move to Malmö or one of the top clubs in Sweden, instead it was in the 3rd tier of a league where it's already hard to get some time in the spotlight. Regardless, as you can imagine, that did not stop him. In fact, it just dragged him all the way back to the top. Right then and there, even if he was only just being introduced into the team, he still managed to finish his first full season with a stretch of 7 goals in 11 matches that not only helped get the club back up to the second tier, but already made them their second highest goal scorer and most likely earned them a call up to the Swedish under-19s, where once again, he immediately left his mark, scoring against Italy to qualify them to the under-19 Euros for the first time in their history. And after all of that, obviously, Brahma-Pokarna realized that it would be their ticket back to the top tier, and before you knew it, he had become the star of the team, starting off the league season with 13 goal contributions in 14 league matches, then going away for the Euros and doing an absolute madness. Look, Sweden went out in the group stage without a single win, and still, in a tournament where players like Rafael Leo, Mason Mount and Jota all played more matches than Giocares, he still came out as the top scorer, getting a goal in every game he played. And of course, once back in his country, he completed his mission, not only leading his team to yet another title, scoring a hat-trick in the final match day, but also making sure to score the goal that would put them in the semi-finals of the Swedish Cup against all odds. And if for a second you doubted that Giocares really had been responsible for the team's rebirth, then let me tell you that it was right after this that he left, and almost immediately Brahma-Pokarna ended up getting relegated twice in a row again. They were nothing without him. Regardless, he was finally at Brighton, and the first sort of problem to come up with was that Giocares was sent straight to the under-23s. And though this is not inherently wrong, I mean eventually they did the same to Fofana, and that worked out. Well, back then it wasn't the same. Brighton's under-23s weren't even in the first division. And though Giocares performed every time, scoring 11 goals in his first 12 appearances for them, leading them to promotion and then keeping it all up in the first division, after 1 full year at the club's academy, even if he was already playing his first few games with the Swedish national team, Brighton were still yet to figure out what was his best position, constantly going back and forth between playing him on the wing or as a striker, and even worse, it still didn't seem like there would be a place for him in the first team anytime soon, allowing him only 91 minutes of playing time across that whole year. Thankfully, the thing about hitting rock bottom is that you can only go up from there, and that's exactly where Coventry City came into the picture. You see, they had just gotten promoted to the Championship, so they felt they had nothing to lose in giving Giocares the chance he was so desperate for, and with his performances over the rest of the season not exactly blowing anyone's mind, once they offered Brighton €1 million for his permanent signing, they took it. After 2.5 years of waiting for his talent to develop, even they began doubting their own scouting department. Little did they know that their problem was exactly that they had been waiting rather than acting. It takes one to know one, but at Coventry, this altercation wasn't as innocent as it may have appeared on the surface. Over the course of those 5 months, Giocares had developed a close bond with manager Mark Robins, who had previously played strike for teams like Manchester United and Manchester City. It's possible that Robins was the first to recognize that Giocares had all the makings of a predator, and as the guy would later tell the media, "It's nice to have someone who truly gets me." He contributed 11 goals in the season's first 11 games, and it was only fitting that he continued to grow from then on. When Zlatan hurt his knee and had to miss the World Cup qualifications, there was no doubt Giocares would be the one tasked with filling his shoes. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and press the bell icon. See you in the next video.